Welcome to the Deep Dive. Some really interesting material today. It's an audio teaching from Ron W Rathbun.
And today, the focus is something pretty universal: emotional pain, how to find freedom from it.
Exactly. This specific recording gives a fascinating angle on feelings. What they are, how we handle them.
Think of this as like a guided tour through some ideas that could genuinely shift how you manage your own emotional world.
Right. And Rathbun kicks things off with a pretty bold claim. Ultimately, everything in your life, it really boils down to how you feel.
Which sounds simple, but it's profound when you unpack it.
It really is. We all know feelings are intense, powerful, but he asks us to think, can we really control our deepest feelings? Especially when, they feel like they're caused by stuff happening outside us.
Okay, let's really get into that. Because his core idea is, well, quite something. He says, look, feelings are our most intimate experience, sure, but they're also fundamentally under our control.
How does he figure that?
His logic is straightforward. Nothing and no one outside of you can feel for you. Things happen, yeah, people act a certain way, but that internal reaction, that feeling, that's yours. Only yours.
It's unto ourselves, I think was the phrase he used.
Precisely. So that driver who cuts you off, the anger you feel, that's your anger. It's generated inside you in response.
That makes sense.
And he goes further. He suggests that when we feel those dissonant emotions, like that lingering sadness or anxiety that doesn't quite seem to fit the situation, comes from a kind of like internal static and inability on our part to be able to feel ourselves, as he puts it. Like we're not quite tuned in correctly inside.
That makes you think about how much other people's negativity affects us. He talks about internalizing their disharmony, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. How easily we can sort of soak up the bad vibes, the emotional noise from others, often without even noticing we're doing it.
And when we take that on, what happens?
It can lead to this really deep feeling of being, well, inadequate. He uses the phrase less than human.
Wow, that's strong.
It is strong, but it really captures how deeply that absorbed negativity can mess with our sense of self.
It's like you walk into a meeting where everyone's tense,
Yeah.
and suddenly you're tense even if you had no reason to be before.
Exactly that. But, and this is important, Rathbun stresses that healing this isn't about blaming those other people. It's an inside job. Recognizing what we've taken on board and eventually understanding why we were open to that hurt in the first place, it points back to us.
So this seems to lead into what he calls a spiritual path. Now, spiritual can mean a lot of things. What's his take?
It's actually very grounded. He basically says, look, everyone's on a spiritual path, whether you label it that way or not, because you can't live without your spirit. It's fundamental. He kind of contrasts the common view of spirit as, something for after you die.
Right, afterlife stuff.
Yeah. With the idea that spirit is essential for feeling alive, for experiencing the present moment fully.
And if we're not connected to that, if we're living in a way that feels inauthentic.
Well, he suggests that the spirit, when it can't feel properly, when it's stifled, it's almost like it starts to die, metaphorically, of course. That disconnect from our core self, that's what fuels those disharmonious feelings we talked about. That sense of being cut off from yourself.
Okay, so there's this deep need to feel, to be connected inside. And he also talks about this drive to evolve, right? Like the natural human thing.
Absolutely. He proposes that deep down, we all have this innate sense that life should be about growth, about moving forward, becoming more.
And when that doesn't happen, feel stuck.
That's when we feel what he calls an earthly form of emptiness. Just a lack of good feeling, a kind of hollowness because we're not progressing.
Yeah, that nagging feeling that something's off, something's missing, even if you can't quite name it.
Exactly. And again, he brings it back inside. The answers, the relief from that pain or emptiness, they're not found by trying to change other people's actions. They're found within our own understanding of ourselves.
Which leads us neatly into a really key concept for him: detachment.
He calls it learning how to get to a one point and detach from an attached feeling from another person to our conscious awareness. It's about recognizing that's their feeling, even if it's aimed at me, and this is mine.
And he mentioned negative feelings getting stuck in loops. How does detachment help there?
Right, so negative emotions, they can really get stuck on repeat, can't they? Like a song you can't get out of your head. And when we're caught in that loop, our minds often try to, analyze it to death or rationalize it. Rathbun suggests that if we can't really process the feeling mentally, we might default to our intellect or ego.
Like trying to think our way out of a feeling. Or blaming someone.
Exactly. We build a story around the pain, why it's justified, whose fault it is. But Rathbun points out that this pain can actually become like part of our personality almost, a defense mechanism.
So we start seeing ourselves as the person who was wronged or the anxious one.
But just thinking about it, rationalizing it, doesn't actually make the bad feeling go away. It just sort of locks it in place differently.
This really circles back to the importance of self-connection, that internal focus he keeps mentioning.
It really does. How vital it is to understand yourself in the context of your own life. You know, sharing with others is fine, but it always comes back to your personal understanding, your personal experience.
And freedom, ultimately, is individual.
Exactly. True freedom is personal, and it highlights the, well, futility sometimes of trying to control how other people act.
Right, because they might be totally unaware or just not willing to change.
Precisely. We can't force their hand. But what we can control, Rathbun emphasizes, is how we treat others, because that's a direct reflection of our own inner state, our own connection, or lack thereof, to our spirit.
Okay. Then he throws in this term, the matrix, a socialized, conditioned reality. What's he getting at there?
He's using it metaphorically to describe this common way of living where people are primarily driven by external things, actions, reactions, constantly comparing themselves.
Like keeping up with the Joneses, but emotionally too.
Yeah. Within this matrix, as he calls it, people often fall into one of three roles. Trying to control everything, feeling controlled by everything, or just desperately trying to break free from that whole push-pull dynamic. It's a reality based heavily on external validation.
Sounds exhausting and easy to get trapped in. Okay, switching tracks a bit, he talks about the nonlinear nature of emotion. Why is that significant?
This is really interesting. The idea is that emotions don't really follow neat, linear rules or boundaries. You know how you can sometimes just feel someone's mood instantly, even a stranger?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Walk into a room and just know.
Right. There isn't a solid wall between our emotional energies. It's more like we're all swimming in the same non-linear energy, as he puts it. We're interconnected on that subtle level.
That makes perfect sense of that feeling the room phenomenon.
Exactly. It explains that openness, that connection, but also explains why we're so easily impacted by others' emotional states, which, you know, can lead to pain if it's negative energy.
What's the goal of detachment?
So Rathbun suggests that a really key part of growth is learning to create that internal space detaching so we aren't constantly triggered by every emotional wave that comes our way.
From outside and inside.
Both. External triggers, like someone's comment, and internal ones, like beating yourself up. He points out how common it is to feel bad because of how others treat us, and to feel bad about ourselves for, say, not handling life better. And he says both of those loops ultimately trace back to how we're treating ourselves internally.
He also mentioned negative emotion creating a downward spiral. We've all been there, right?
Yep.
One bad thought leads to another.
Oh, for sure. Negative feelings tend to feed themselves, creating this momentum that's hard to stop. But he offers a strategy, consciously shifting into the mind.
How does that help?
He suggests negative emotion often gets, like, stuck in compartments. By engaging your conscious mind, you can create some distance, some detachment from that stuck feeling.
So using your thinking mind strategically, not to analyze the feeling away, but to create space from it.
Exactly. Gaining perspective. And that mental detachment, he argues, leads towards real individual freedom. The more you consciously choose not to dwell on the negative feeling, the less power it has. It starts to weaken and eventually can dissipate.
And what happens then when the pain starts to lessen? Is there something after detachment?
Yes, that's a key point. Once you've created that distance, that space from the intense pain, then you have this amazing opportunity for self-realization. You can look back more clearly and ask, okay, why did I pick up that pain? What was going on in me?
Without the emotion overwhelming the insight.
Precisely. That's where the real learning and deeper healing can happen.
He did mention, though, how feeling badly treated can get tangled up with feeling bad about yourself. That sounds like a really tough knot.
It is. It's a really difficult cycle. Feeling victimized and self-critical at the same time, it's sticky. But Rathbun does point towards something he calls the greater Kelee and practices like mind relaxation as ways to approach this.
The greater Kelee, that term came up. What is that exactly?
He describes it as a kind of broader, nonlinear realm, something that helps you access your mind more easily, get beyond the usual loops. He suggests that really understanding how we treat each other is part of this bigger picture, leading towards potentially collective freedom.
And Kelee meditation was mentioned.
Yes, as a specific technique or tool aimed at helping free oneself from pain, whether it feels like it's coming from outside or generated from within.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. This deep dive into Rathbun's ideas, it's really explored how our feelings, while so personal, might actually be within our sphere of influence.
Yeah, we looked at how we absorb others' emotions, the importance of connecting inwardly, that natural pull towards growth versus the emptiness of stagnation.
And this really central role of detachment, learning to create that space to break free from those negative loops.
And maybe the biggest takeaway, the thing to really sit with, is this idea that ultimately your emotional well-being is, well, it's down to you. It rests on your self-awareness, how consciously you navigate your inner world.
So here's that final thought we like to leave you with. If our feelings truly are something we can influence, even just a little, what's one small thing, one tiny intentional step you could maybe take today to start shifting your relationship with an emotion that often gives you trouble?
Something to mull over.
Definitely. We hope this gave you some useful food for thought on self-understanding and maybe finding a bit more emotional freedom. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.